Patreon, welcome back. Thank you so much, David. Fun episode. When did they approach you with the script idea? What year?
You mean for the film?
Yeah.
Let's see. The Rolling Stone got published. So Rolling Stone had a deal. We had a deal with Rolling Stone that they wouldn't publish anything until after the my legal jeopardy was passed.
Right.
So they had to wait because the New York Times article came out in 2008. That's when Rolling Stone got interested, and they had to wait 3 years for our
sentencing.
For the sentencing
Adjudication.
So Rolling Stone got published in 2011. I remember it got published while I was still under probation. And my probation officer saw it, and I went in for like my weekly meeting or whatever it was, and he like has a copy in it. And he's like, this is you, Packouz, you know? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, you think you're famous now or something?
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And I'm like, it's just, listen, I'm just telling my story. And he's like, you're not going to like tell them about how we do things around here, right? I'm like, what are you nervous about?
Yeah. Who have you been fiddling with? Who you been touching?
Exactly. Luckily not me. But
did you? So it was after that.
So when the Rolling Stone article came out, that's what got Todd Phillips' attention, and they negotiated for like a couple months or something. But eventually, the way it works is they option the rights, right? Yeah. So they give you like 10, 20 grand, whatever.
Right.
And that means they have the option to start production within the next 2 to 3 years.
Right.
And if they don't do it, then they have the option to re-up the option for like another 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
And so at first they were planning on, Todd Phillips was, in the middle of filming The Hangover, Hangover 2, when 2011. And so we were hoping that he was going to start filming War Dogs between Hangover 2 and 3, but he decided to do Hangover 3 first because it was a sure moneymaker.
Yeah.
And so War Dogs didn't start production until 2015.
Okay. And it was his company that optioned your life rights.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they didn't need to option my life rights, but they wanted my involvement to make it more realistic.
Yeah. So did you have involvement in the script?
So the way the script was written, so Stephen Chin, as I mentioned, the real guy from the Triangle of Death, when they hired him to write the script, he flew into Miami. And he spent like a good week in Miami, and like every day he would interview me and record all the interviews. And he based the first version of the script on my interviews. And then it got rewritten a million times.
Right.
And so,
And did you have any input in the rewrites?
No.
Yeah.
No. So part of the way when they option it, they are very specific. You have zero artistic, control.
Right.
You can have input, but like they don't need to listen to you. You know, they don't even have to take your phone calls or
Is there anything that you wish they had put in there?
Oh man,
they left out.
There's so much stuff. I mean, I honestly believe that I know they toned Efraim's character down a lot.
Totally. We were just saying that while you were in the bathroom.
Yeah.
We were like, Efraim was even worse.
Way worse. In
real life.
Way worse. Way worse.
Wow.
Like in the movie, and they did it consciously. In fact, Steven told me, he's like, he told me when he was doing the interviews, he's like, I'm not going to be able to write Efraim like this. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he says, he's like, if I write him the way he is, no one's going to want to spend an hour and a half in the movie theater.
There's no
with
redeemable qualities.
Exactly. They're going to wonder what the hell's wrong with you for being his friend.
Yeah. No, that's totally true.
They're going to start questioning your judgment. And I'm like, that's a reasonable question.
Because there was nothing redeeming about him in real life.
Yeah.
He wasn't.
I wouldn't say that. He was, I will say, I talk a lot of shit about Efraim, and I obviously still hate his guts.
Have you seen or talked to him since?
I saw the last time I actually saw him in person was when we were negotiating the settlement. I ended up suing him years later after everything was done, and we ended up negotiating something very small, nothing significant, but I just wanted him out of my life.
Yeah.
And so there were some depositions, and so I saw him during that time. And like when I saw him, he's like, hey buddy, as if we're like friends. I'm like, fuck you, man.
Crazy.
You think you were friends? Like what the fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah.
Give me the $5 million you owe me, then we'll be friends.
Right.
Right. But he told, so I actually, I'm good friends with a guy one of our former employees from back in that time. who's still occasionally in contact with it. Well, he's not in contact. Efraim calls him trying to get him to come back to work for him. And there's zero chance, he's going to do that because he has a very good job now, like working for a nonprofit. And Efraim is just like so out of his mind. He thinks that he tells, the guy's name is Ron, right? He's like, Ron, I'll tell you what, I wouldn't offer this. He's like, you're making a lot of money now at your current job, but and like I would not offer this to anyone else. But I'll tell you what, if you come back to work with me, I'm gonna match your salary. And Ron is like, why would I want to do that?
Yeah.
You're gonna have to at least pay me double my salary to even consider working with you. And even then I probably won't work with you because you're a piece of shit.
Yeah. If you actually pay me.
If exactly. And and he's the same exact guy he always was and Ron told me, this is a little story. I actually saw Ron just a few weeks ago. We occasionally have lunch together. We're still friends. And we live in the same area of Miami. And Ron told me that during the COVID times, he had a friend of his who was very desperate for a job. And Efraim kept on trying to get Ron to come back and work for him, right? And he kept on, his pitch to Ron was, he's like, Ron, you don't understand. I'm a totally different guy now. I'm not like the guy I was back then. Prison really straightened me out. I learned my lesson. I do everything with lawyers now, everything 100% above board. I'm a completely legitimate businessman now, That's how he talks. And so Ron, and he kept on saying this, like every few months he'd call Ron and try to get him to
What's his new business?
So so during COVID times, he was brokering like the PPE stuff.
Sure.
And I think he's
just a leech. Yeah, every war or emergency,
he's there.
He's a disaster capitalist.
Absolutely. That's a great way to put it. He's a disaster capitalist. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
I know, he was banned from doing government contracting, but I think the New York Times called me up during that time. They were opening an investigation because they thought he was doing business through a front company, which I'm sure he was, but they couldn't nail him. They didn't get the proof.
I wouldn't surprise me if he goes down again for something.
I am shocked he didn't go down yet, to be honest. I really am. I expected him to end up back in prison or dead.
Yeah.
I think he's fucked over everybody he's done business with. Totally. I'm not saying most people. I'm saying everybody. Everybody. Like, as I said, when his philosophy is if the other guy's happy, there's still money on the table. So he never stops negotiating until you're ready to walk away. Yeah. And you're furious.
Right.
You know? So even he'll agree with something, then he'll come back the next day. He's like, I didn't really consider, we have to, and it goes back on what he just agreed to. It's just never ending. It's draining.
Narcissism,
he drains you. He drains you. That's his whole. I'll tell you a story of when I first realized he was a complete sociopath. And this is the kind of thing they couldn't put in the film because it's just too over the top. It was a few months into working with him. We went to a gun show in Orlando. And we were on our way back to Miami, and he was driving, and it was one of these really long highways with no street lights in the middle of the countryside, where there's just one lane going in each direction without a median or anything. It's just a painted line, to divide it. And he had his brights on, and their car's coming the other direction. And I told him, Efraim, you're supposed to turn your brights down when when another car's coming. And he's like, why? I mean, I need to see the road. And I told him, well, you might blind the other driver. They can crash. And he's like, who cares? I mean, I need to see the road. And I told him, yeah, but they can crash into us. And he's like, oh, good point. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. And he turns the brights down. Yeah. And I'm like, it didn't even occur to him that he should care at all. You know, it just didn't, that's not how his brain worked. Ooh. And so I was like, wow. When he said, I was like, dude, this guy has zero empathy towards anybody.
That's right. And so you obviously know the mistake, a big mistake you made in the first place was just getting deeper and deeper into business with this guy.
Yeah. I mean, I always told myself, I'm like, the more I worked with him, he wasn't like that as a kid. but like, you know, and I'd lost contact with him for quite a few years. So I was kind of getting to know him again in that, or the early days of me working with him. And I realized this guy is a psychopath or sociopath or whatever the term is. And he's probably not a good guy to do business with. But I told myself, you know, you can stick it out for a year. You'll make, I mean, he made $2 million a year. Why can't you make $2 million a year? And then, you know, maybe $5 million, then you'll be set, you know,
get
and
a
then
bag and then you'll get
exactly.
out. Stop working with
that
them.
was my plan. I'm like going to make a bunch of money and then I'm going to quit. And, you know, this guy's going to be in my rear view mirror because he just wasn't a pleasant person to work. Besides all the other risks and issues, he was just a very unpleasant person to be around.
Right.
Yeah. He would constantly get himself into fights and clubs. And in the movie, he there's a scene where Dan Blazarian punches him out because like he's like hitting on some girl, you know? And in real life, he was actually worse than that. He, like in the movie, he like tells the girl, "Oh, I'll give you $1,000 to fast forward to our third date right now." You know, it means I just met the family. You're about to blow me in my car. You know, like that. That's like the line, right? In real life, and I'd seen him do this. He would go up to like a couple, like hanging out at the bar, go up to like the other side of the girl, you know, and like pick up her hand and tell her, "Come with me, baby. You're too good for this loser."
Wow. I like that. I actually admire that gall.
Yeah. And so he would get himself, but he would only do it when he had a few friends around him. Of
course.
So he knew that they would pull him out of any fight that he started. He wouldn't do that shit on his own.
Right. Of course not.
So yeah, but like he had like zero shame.
Sure.
You know, zero.
Yeah.
Like he just didn't give a shit. So yeah, he was just like a
it's pretty it's wild that he comes from good parents for the most part.
Yeah.
It's just you're born, some people are born with a defective moral, just a fucked up brain.
One interesting thing about it is that his grandfather and his uncle have similar issues.
So of course, it comes from somewhere.
It does come from somewhere, and I do think it's genetic.
Yeah.
Because his grandfather, just a little story about his family background. His grandfather is an Iranian Jew, right? That came to like, I forgot how, he came like, I think in his 20s or 30s to the United States from Iran, probably in the 79 revolution, if I had to guess. And his grandfather is one of the biggest, he's a billionaire, his grandfather. He's one of the biggest slumlords in LA. He owns large parts of South Central.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's how Ephraim's uncle, who's his grandfather's son, has that big pawn shop because it was one of his grandfather's properties.
Yeah.
And so his grandfather set him up in business. And his grandfather was married to his grandmother for like, I think 40 years or something. They had like 9 kids together. And then his grandmother decided she wanted to divorce his grandfather. I think there were some like physical abuse issues. He's Iranian.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Iranian,
Sure.
you know, traditional Iranian. It's not uncommon. And she tried to divorce him. And then it turned out that she had never been married to him legally in the first place. They had just gotten married traditionally in the synagogue, you know, religiously. And so he decided to give her $0. $0.
That's cold.
0. And she sued him. And it was the biggest alimony lawsuit in history. It got into the papers. I think she sued him for $700 million.
Well, she must have won some of that because it's common law, California common law.
I think she eventually negotiated something way smaller than that,
Right.
but I think they eventually negotiated a settlement. But that just goes to show you the kind of person, the kind of family you know, he comes from.
That's the stock that he comes from.
Yeah, and I'm not saying all his family's like that.
Yeah.
I mean, his father is a sweetheart. You know, he treated his father horribly. It really was terrible. His uncle is his other uncle, not the pawn shop owner, but the pawn shop owner's brother is a guy named Shmuley Boteach, who is a famous rabbi. He was actually Michael Jackson's rabbi for a little bit. And he's also very controversial. He wrote this book called Kosher Sex, which like was very scandalous in the Jewish community. So like, you know, his family's kind of like, they've got that grifter, you know, scammy side to them, some of them, you know.
Yeah. Makes sense. And there's really nothing you could do. You just got to hope that they don't reproduce. You know what I mean?
Well, they're Orthodox Jews, so they reproduce quite a bit, unfortunately. But unfortunately,
he doesn't have any kids,
I should say that. But what?
He doesn't have any kids, though.
I think he actually just had his first kid.
Jesus.
So he married a Russian woman.
Yeah, this is all tracks. This is
all tracks. You know the Russians.
Yeah.
They love.
They
that
marry
shit.
for love.
Yeah, exactly. And so the funny thing is that so I was talking to Matt Cox. You know, I went on his podcast as I mentioned before. Matt is still in contact with Efraim occasionally, right? I mean, Efraim screwed him out of all the money for the memoir, of course, as he did, you know. And Matt told me, he's writing Ephraim's memoir in prison with him. And Efraim is bragging, oh, and then I did this deal and I screwed him in this way. And then I did that deal with that other guy and I screwed him in that way. And he's very proud of all the different ways he screwed people. Yeah. And Matt tells him, this is what Matt told me. He said, Matt tells him, you know, Efraim, you can't just keep on burning all your bridges, man. And Efraim looks at him and he says, Matt, there's a lot of bridges out there.
That's pretty sage advice.
And Matt told me, and it was that moment I realized this guy's gonna fuck me too. You know, hilarious. Like I know we made a deal that I'm getting half the money from this book, but there's no way I'm getting a penny for it. And he
kept
was
doing
right.
it?
And
he finished it for him? He finished the book for him?
He finished the book. He was like already halfway through.
Is Efraim illiterate? Like, why can Efraim not write the book himself?
He says he has like ADHD and
Which
stuff
is
like
probably
that.
true.
Yeah, probably true. But yeah, I mean, Matt was writing a lot of the prisoners. That's how Matt got into his like podcast thing, is that he wrote his own memoir in prison, and then he started writing the other prisoners' memoirs. And he figured, you know, he knew that when he started writing this memoir for Efraim, he knew that the movie was going to happen. And so they thought they were going to ride the coattails of the movie, and this was going to be a big book, and they were going to make a bunch of money from it. Turns out that Efraim just used the book to try to sue Warner Brothers for stealing his story. So Matt actually wrote a book about this whole experience called Dude, Where's My Hand Grenade? And where he details how he got into this whole thing. And where Efraim, they wanted to come out with the book, Once a Gun Runner, the name of his memoir. They wanted to come out with it before the War Dogs movie came out so that they could claim War Dogs was based on the book and that they stole the story.
But he's been paid already, right? His life rights have been optioned.
No, Efraim never got his life rights optioned. Wow. They didn't want to deal with him because he's a pathological liar and he was in prison, and they didn't want to deal with him. So,
are they able to legally do that then?
Yeah, because they didn't have to get my life rights either. Legally, if your name appears in the newspapers or on TV,
it's public.
You're a public figure now.
Public figure.
You're a public figure, and because of freedom of speech, anything can be written about any public figure.
Right.
And you can't sue them for libel. You can't sue them for stealing your story. You know, and so he wanted to say that. It was actually kind of genius. They tricked some guy who was involved, whose father was like one of the top guys in Warner Brothers. They tricked him into having to signing a non-disclosure agreement, and then like having his they emailed him the draft of the script, and so they claimed that he secretly gave the script to his father, who was like one of the like head guys in Warner Brothers, and then they wanted to sue Warner Brothers for stealing his script, his story. Wow. Now, in order to be able to do that, they needed Matt to finish the book real fast, and Matt was like, "This is not enough time," and so they said, you know what? We don't give a shit about the quality of the book. Yeah. Why don't you already wrote this other this other work of fiction about like some like child kidnapping called Stranger Danger that he had never been published. Why don't you just take sections of that book, change the names, put it into Ephraim's book, and that'll be enough to finish the book. Right. So like half of Ephraim's book is like literally just stolen from it was Matt's own work, but literally a work of fiction, like literally not even like embellished. It's like literally just straight up.
They just wrote it as a piece. He just needed the book to be able to sue.
Exactly. Yeah, and so they sue. That's so weird. They sue Warner Brothers for stealing the story, and then the movie comes out. And turns out the movie is absolutely nothing like the book. You know, there's no even resemblance. Yeah. So they can't sue him for stealing it, for basing it. Yeah. And so then the real genius thing is they turn around and they sue them for advertising the movie as being based on a true story, when Ephraim's book is the true story, and obviously has nothing to do with Ephraim's book, so it's not the true story. So it's false advertising of based on a true story. So they sue them for claiming it's the true story when Ephraim's is the true story, and therefore it's going to hurt Ephraim's book sales because they're claiming to have the true story when he has the true story. Right. So they try to like strong arm Warner Brothers into a settlement. And they almost succeeded. But then what they didn't count on is that Matt ended up getting his sentence reduced and got out of prison early.
Right.
And then he was furious at Efraim for fucking him out of everything, of
Yeah.
course, as Efraim does. And Matt managed to tank their lawsuit.
I had no idea, because
yeah.
we hung out with Matt a ton after
Yeah.
we did his podcast.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I didn't know he was involved like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And
He wrote once Dude, Where's My Hand Grenade is the name of his book. I think
Yeah.
he selling it on Amazon if you're
Wow.
curious. It's a small book, but it's interesting. Yeah.
Did you get paid again? Because the movie was a hit.
Yeah.
The movie really did well.
Yeah.
Did
Yeah,
you
yeah.
get paid again when they made the movie?
So the way it works is they option your rights, which is like a relatively
Yeah.
small amount, the tens of thousands.
Yeah.
And then if the movie actually goes into production, then you get a few $100,000.
Nice.
So I got a few $100K.
Okay.
Which is not bad.
No.
Of course, it's nothing close to the millions that the guy pretending to be me in the movie got.
Yeah.
I'm sure Miles Teller got a lot more money pretending to be me than I got for being me.
You're right. Yeah. But did you get to meet him?
I
you go to the
did,
movie?
yeah.
Went to the movie
I went to
premiere?
the movie premiere. I mean, I
That's-
met him on set when I did my cameo in the film.
What? Yeah. Who?
yeah.
Who are you? It's been a minute since I've seen it.
There's a scene in the movie and early in the movie, like the first 5 minutes, where Miles Teller is trying to sell bed sheets to a nursing home owner, and there's a guy there who's entertaining the old folks there, playing guitar and singing. That guy is me.
Okay.
So and the song I'm singing is "Don't Fear the Reaper" to a group of 90-year-old people.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
That's
so
great.
that was the big joke. I wanted to play.
Nice.
I've written songs. I've published songs. I'm a musician, so I wanted to do one of my original songs, of course, because I was like, "Oh, this is my big break. I'm gonna have an original song in a Hollywood movie." And they're like, "No, you either play this song or we're getting someone else to do it." Because they wanted the joke. They wanted
That's
the joke.
funny.
So-
Did you take that idea to Todd Phillips? Did you say, "Come on, man, let me play my original"?
Yeah, no, I did, and he's like, "No, this is the only option here."
I love that.
Yeah.
Dictator on set.
Yeah. No, he was not even willing to even listen to my music to even
It's
think
cool
about
that
it.
they put you in there, though. It's cool.
Yeah,
they put you in there.
it was cool. It was
Yeah.
cool. So I get my 3 seconds of on-screen time, my 3
and
seconds of fame.
and the whole community that you grew up in. It's kind of a redemption in a way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They were. It's funny. So when the movie came out, I went to the main premiere, and that was super cool. I got to walk the red carpet. It was actually black, but whatever. And I got to meet Bradley Cooper and Anna Darmus, who unfortunately wasn't there, but not at the premiere. But I did meet her on set, on one of the sets in Miami. They invited me to go a few times, and so I met her in person that way, and she's gorgeous in real life too.
Yeah.
It's actually funny because she asked me when I met her that because they gave her a very deep spray tan for the role.
Right.
Because she's a very white girl, and they gave her a very deep spray tan. And she's like, your ex-wife, who I'm playing, is she this dark? Because I told them this is a way too dark spray tan. And I told her she's way darker than you because she's actually half African. So they completely whitewashed her.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I watched them, I actually watched the movie with my daughter, who's 17 years old now. And I watched it for the first time with her just a few months ago. Wow. She'd never seen it before. And at first she wasn't even interested in seeing it, which I thought was weird because you'd think you'd be interested in the movie based on your dad.
Yeah.
And she goes, she's into Japanese anime.
Kids don't give a fuck about movies.
Yeah.
It's not like the old days.
Yeah. And so eventually, she got interested enough to see it, and we watched it. And her big takeaway was the baby that, because she appears in the film, and they change her name, but there's a baby in the film that's my kid.
I didn't know that. Oh,
so
wow.
they have a little. They change her name, but it's playing her.
Yeah.
And it's a white baby, and she's not white. She's half black, a quarter black. So she's like, they whitewashed me.
Right.
That was her takeaway.